Hello again. The idea of another civil war in this country, almost 400 years after the last one in the mid 17th century, is a chilling thought. And yet, in a survey by YouGov in the summer of 2024, a third of those polled thought that a civil war in this country was either very or somewhat likely. Of course, there's no hard and fast definition of what constitutes a civil war, so we don't really know what those who responded to this opinion poll actually thought would be likely or unlikely. When people talk vaguely of a civil war in Britain, they're almost certainly not thinking of two rival armies facing each other across a conventional battleground, as they did in the English Civil War and then 200 later in the American Civil War. We're not going to see a Battle of Gettysburg or Naseby in the future. Most people envisage something a little more low-key, along the lines of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, perhaps. Mind, that would be bad enough if the British Army was required to suppress guerrilla fighters who were intent on driving out some section of the community from their homes. During the early years of the Troubles in Belfast, we saw what would well be the pattern for a civil war here in mainland Britain. This entailed burning the homes of a religious minority and driving them out of certain districts, which it was hoped would become religiously homogeneous. The result was ghettos and autonomous areas where everybody belonged to one religious sect, either Protestant or Catholic. There were no-go areas where armed militias enforced the law and the army and police were not allowed entry. It requires, I think, no great stretch of the imagination to see how that kind of thing could develop in England, with Muslims running certain districts and any non-Muslims being made to feel distinctly unwelcome and perhaps being subjected to violence in order to encourage them to leave. One can easily envisage the same process taking place in white areas, with English nationalists trying to ensure that their districts so remained ethnically and religiously homogeneous. If there were to be a low-level war, then this is the most likely scenario, with Muslims on one side, white nationalists on the other, and the police and possibly the army trying to maintain order. It's not an enticing prospect, but one which every passing year seems to make more likely. The growth of sectarianism and separate communities is very alarming in this respect in Britain. As I say, it's likely to end in a form of asymmetric warfare, perhaps involving petrol bombs and possibly improvised explosive devices rather than fierce gun battles. We've already seen disorder in this country which could, with only a little more violence, properly be described as guerrilla warfare, and the tensions in British society show no present signs of abating. The more that ordinary people feel helpless and disenfranchised, literally disenfranchised since many are now being denied the opportunity to cast a vote, the more likely it is that such people will resort to violence. I find this an appalling prospect, but it is one which is increasingly being discussed in academic and military circles as a very real possibility. Nobody appears to have any plans for dealing with this growing civil unrest, and if we're not careful, then it will one day simply erupt. If that happens, then Britain will never be the same again.